The first time Quinn Yardley woke to find his broken fence mended before dawn, he thought he had imagined the damage in the evening gloom, though he knew his own eyes better than that. The second time it happened, 3 nights later, he stood in the gray pre-dawn light running his calloused fingers over boards that had been splintered by a boar's charge the night before, now lashed tight with fresh rope he did not own, and felt the back of his neck prickle with the sensation of being watched. By the fourth incident, when he found wolf tracks circling his chicken coop and then leading away in a pattern that spoke of something larger chasing them off, and by the 7th morning when his plow blade sat newly sharpened beside his barn door, Quinn understood that he had a guardian he had never seen, and the mystery of it settled into his bones like an ache he could not name. He was not a man given to flights of fancy. His neighbors in the valley settlements often remarked that Quinn was as solid as the fieldstone foundations he laid, a man who spoke only when words were needed and worked from first light until his body demanded rest. He had bought this farm on the frontier edge 3 years ago with money saved from his time in the territorial militia, back when the conflicts between human settlers and orc clans had kept the borderlands bloody and uncertain. Those days had ended with treaties Quinn did not pretend to understand, but he had seen enough killing to last him 2 lifetimes, and he had wanted nothing more than land he could work with his own hands and silence enough to sleep without reaching for a weapon. The farm gave him both 20 acres of decent soil carved from the wilderness, far enough from the nearest settlement that he could go weeks without seeing another human face. He did not mind the solitude. He minded, quite intensely, the idea that someone thought he needed protecting. Quinn spent 2 weeks watching, sleeping in snatches during the day and positioning himself at different vantage points each night. He saw nothing. Whatever his guardian was, they moved like smoke and shadow, arriving after he appeared to sleep and departing before true dawn. He found more evidence of their work. A section of roof thatch repaired after a storm, his water barrel's broken stave replaced, deep gouges in the earth near his pasture fence, where something large had been dragged away. That last discovery sent him walking the perimeter until he found the carcass of a plains cat 100 yards into the forest, its neck broken cleanly. The creature could have killed half his livestock in a night. Someone had stopped it. The frustration of being helped without consent warred inside him with something else, something that felt uncomfortably like gratitude mixed with a curiosity so sharp it kept him awake even when exhaustion weighted his limbs. He began leaving things out: a cup of water, portions of his dinner wrapped in cloth, a blanket on cold nights. The food and water were always consumed. The blanket was always folded and returned to his porch before sunrise. It was nearly a month before Quinn changed his tactics. He stopped trying to catch his guardian through watching, and instead prepared a different kind of trap, one that required patience rather than vigilance. He spent 3 days visibly laboring over his north fence line, the section that bordered the deep forest, deliberately weakening several posts while appearing to strengthen them. He complained loudly to his horses about the poor quality of the wood, though the animals paid him no more attention than usual. Then he went to bed at his normal hour, made a convincing show of banking his fire and closing his shutters, and settled down to wait in the darkness of his own home with a clear view through a gap in the window boards. The moon was 3/4 full, bright enough to paint the farmyard in shades of silver and shadow. Quinn's eyes adjusted slowly, his breathing deliberate and calm the way he had learned during long watches in hostile territory. Hours passed. The night sounds of the frontier moved around him: the distant cry of a hunting owl, the rustle of wind through new wheat, the soft movements of his horses in their shelter. He did not let himself drift, though his body knew the late hour and protested. She appeared so quietly that for a moment Quinn thought she was simply a thicker shadow separating itself from the tree line. But then the moonlight caught the shape of her, and his breath stopped in his chest. An orc woman, moving across his field with a grace that seemed impossible for her powerful frame, carrying herself with the easy confidence of someone who had walked this path many times before. She was not as tall as the orc warriors he had seen during the border conflicts, perhaps only a few inches taller than his own 6 feet. But even at this distance, he could see the strength in her broad shoulders and the athleticism in the way she moved. Her skin was the deep green of summer moss, visible even in the colorless moonlight, and her dark hair had been pulled back into a thick braid that hung past her shoulder blades. Quinn watched her approach his deliberately sabotaged fence line, watched her kneel to examine the posts with her back to his house, and felt something shift violently in his chest. This was the person who had guarded his farm, who had mended his fences and driven off predators, and kept watch over his sleeping household of one. This orc woman who had no reason he could fathom to care whether his chickens survived or his roof stayed whole. He moved without conscious decision, muscle memory from his militia years letting him exit through his back door and circle around in complete silence while she was focused on her work. He approached from downwind, using the barn as cover, getting close enough that he could hear her muttering under her breath in what sounded like criticism of his carpentry choices. The words were in the human tongue, accented but fluent, and the ordinary irritation in her voice struck him as absurdly endearing given the circumstances. "The wood is fine," Quinn said quietly, not wanting to startle her into violence. "I weakened those posts on purpose." She spun with a speed that proved his caution wise, and for a frozen moment they stared at each other across 10 feet of moonlit grass. Up close, she was even more striking than he had anticipated. Her face was strong-featured and feminine at once, with high cheekbones and a broad nose, and the small tusks that curved up from her lower jaw only emphasized the fullness of her mouth. Her eyes were wide with shock, a color he could not determine in the darkness, and her pointed ears had flattened back against her skull in an expression he recognized as alarm. "You have been guarding my farm," Quinn continued when she did not speak, keeping his voice level and his hands visible at his sides. "Every night for at least a month, probably longer. You have mended my fences and repaired my roof and killed predators that would have slaughtered my livestock. You have kept me and mine safe, and I do not even know your name." The orc woman's ears came slowly forward again, though her whole body remained tensed like a drawn bow. She was breathing hard, her chest rising and falling beneath the worn leather vest and simple shirt she wore, and Quinn had the distinct impression that she was debating whether to run or stay. The silence stretched long enough that he began to think she would choose running, but then she straightened her spine and lifted her chin with a pride that struck him somewhere behind his ribs. "You were not supposed to know," she said, and her voice was lower than he expected, rough-edged and careful. "That was the entire point." "I am a light sleeper," Quinn replied, "and stubborn. Why what? Why do you guard my farm? Why do you protect me?" The questions came out more intense than he intended, carrying a weight of feeling he had not known he was holding. "I am no one to you. We have never met. What possible reason could you have for spending your nights keeping watch over a stranger?" Something flickered across her face too quickly for him to read, and she looked away from him toward the forest, her jaw tight. When she spoke again, her voice had gone flat, carefully emptied of emotion. "I owed a debt. Now it is paid. You will not see me again." She turned to leave, and Quinn felt a sharp panic at the thought of her disappearing back into the shadows, of never understanding this mystery or seeing her face again. He moved without thinking, closing the distance between them in 3 long strides, not touching her but putting himself in her path. She stopped, her eyes narrowing dangerously, and he realized with a strange clarity that he was not afraid of her at all despite every rational reason he should be. "What debt?" he asked, and then the words that had been building in his chest since he first saw her silhouette in the moonlight came spilling out in a rush that bypassed every careful habit of his nature. "What debt could be worth this much devotion? I do not want you to leave. I want to know you. I want to understand why you did this, and I want to find a way to deserve the protection you have given me. And I know this is madness because I have known you for less than 5 minutes. But I think I have been half in love with my invisible guardian for weeks now, and discovering she is you only makes it worse. Marry me." The words hung in the air between them like something physical. Quinn heard them echo in his own ears and felt his face heat with mortified shock at himself. He had never proposed to anyone. He had barely courted anyone. He did not even know this woman's name, and he had just asked her to marry him in his farmyard in the middle of the night like a lunatic. Her expression had gone completely blank with astonishment, her mouth slightly open and her eyes enormous, and he could not tell if she was about to laugh or gut him or both. "That is the most ridiculous thing anyone has ever said to me," she said finally, her voice faint with disbelief. "You do not know anything about me." "I know you are honorable," Quinn said, too far committed to back down now even though heat was crawling up the back of his neck. "I know you are skilled and strong and dedicated. I know you have protected my home for weeks expecting nothing in return. I know my heart started pounding the moment I saw you, and it has not slowed down yet. Tell me those are not good reasons." "Those are insane reasons." Her voice rose, somewhere between outraged and bewildered. "You cannot propose marriage to someone because they mended your fences. That is not how anything works." "Then tell me how it works," Quinn shot back, desperately trying to salvage something from his own impulsiveness. "Tell me your name at least. Tell me why you were here. Give me something other than watching you walk away." She stared at him for a long moment, conflict written plainly across her features, and then she sighed with her whole body, the tension draining out of her shoulders. "My name is Jara. The debt I owed you was life for life. And I cannot marry you, Quinn Yardley, because I am not free to marry anyone." The fact that she knew his name should not have surprised him given how long she had apparently been watching his farm, but it still sent a small thrill through him to hear it in her rough, edged voice. "What do you mean you are not free? Are you bound to someone else?" "No." Jara looked away again, her ears flattening back slightly. "I am an exile from my clan. I have no right to marry, no right to make contracts or oaths, no standing to join my life to anyone else's. The law is clear." "Whose law? I do not recognize any law that says you cannot make your own choices." "My people's law." She met his eyes again, and there was pain in her expression now, old and worn. "I was cast out 2 years ago. I have no clan, no family, no place. I am no one, Quinn Yardley." "You would tie yourself to no one." Quinn felt his jaw tighten. He recognized injustice when he heard it, and something in him had always rebelled against arbitrary cruelty, even when rebellion was dangerous. "That is the second most ridiculous thing I have heard tonight. You are standing right in front of me. You are very clearly someone. You do not understand orc ways. Then explain them to me." He gentled his voice with effort. "Please, you said you owed me life for life. What did you mean?" Jara was quiet for long enough that he thought she would refuse to answer, but then she wrapped her arms around herself in a gesture that looked uncharacteristically defensive and began to speak. 2 years ago, I was traveling south after my exile, avoiding settlements, staying to the wild places. I had not eaten in days. I was weak and stupid with hunger, and I tried to steal from a farm on the frontier edge. The farmer caught me in his barn. I thought he would kill me or raise an alarm for others to kill me, but he did neither. He brought me food instead, bread and cheese and dried meat. He told me I looked like I needed it more than he did, and he asked no questions and demanded no payment. Then he went back into his house and left me there. I ate until I could think clearly again, and then I left. I did not even thank him. Quinn's breath caught as understanding dawned. That was you. That was my barn. Yes. She still would not look at him. You saved my life that night, though you did not know it. I was closer to dying than I had realized. The food gave me strength enough to hunt, to survive, to keep moving. By orc custom, life debt is sacred. I owed you life for life, service for service. So when I was traveling back through this territory a season later and recognized your farm, I began to pay the debt the only way I could, without revealing myself and burdening you with the knowledge of it. I thought if I could guard you and your home long enough, the balance would be restored. I thought I could slip away and you would never know. I gave you some food, Quinn said slowly, trying to process this. You have spent months protecting my entire farm because I gave you food when you were hungry. You gave me my life back when you had every reason to treat me as an enemy. Yes, I protected your farm. And now you have caught me, and the debt is revealed, which means it is no longer a debt freely paid but an obligation exposed. Jara's voice had gone bitter. The honor of it is tainted. I have failed even at this. Quinn wanted to shake her and also pull her close, two contradictory impulses that left him standing frozen. That is the most backwards reasoning I have ever heard. How is the debt tainted? You still did everything you did. You still kept me safe. The only thing that has changed is that now I know to thank you for it. You do not understand. You are right. I do not understand. I do not understand why you think being caught somehow undoes weeks of service. I do not understand why you were exiled, or what law says you cannot make your own choices about your own life. I do not understand why you are so determined to disappear when I am standing here telling you I want you to stay. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration and confusion and that strange aching want all tangled together in his chest. I am sorry I proposed like an idiot. That was too much, too fast, I know that. But do not leave, Jara. Please, let me at least know you. Let me try to court you properly. Let me see if this feeling I have is real or just madness. It cannot be real. You do not know me. Then let me learn. Quinn heard the pleading in his own voice and did not care. Stay, talk with me, visit in the daylight instead of sneaking around in the dark. Give me a chance to prove that I see you, not just some fantasy guardian. Give yourself a chance to see if I am worth the months you spent protecting me. Jara looked at him fully then, searching his face with an intensity that felt like being laid open, and he made himself hold still under that scrutiny, letting her see whatever she needed to see. The night sounds continued around them, indifferent to the small human drama playing out in the farmyard. A horse whickered softly from the barn. The wind shifted, carrying the green scent of growing things. If I stay, she said finally, slowly, each word careful, if I agree to let you court me in daylight, you need to understand what that means. I am an exile. If my people discover I am attempting to court or marry, there will be consequences. If your people discover you are involved with an orc, there will be consequences. We live in a time of peace, but it is a new peace and fragile. Many on both sides still carry hatred. You would be tying yourself to someone who brings nothing but complications. I am a farmer on the frontier edge, Quinn said. I already have complications. What is a few more? The corner of her mouth twitched, almost a smile. You are either very brave or very stupid. I have been called both. He did smile then, small and cautious, often in the same breath. Stay for breakfast at least. Let me feed you a meal in return for the one you never thanked me for. Everything else we can figure out as we go. Jara studied him a moment longer, and then she nodded once, sharp and decisive. Breakfast. But then I leave, and if you still want to pursue this madness tomorrow night, I will come back. We do this slowly, Quinn Yardley. We do this right. I will not accept a proposal born from surprise and ignorance, no matter how pretty the words. Tomorrow night, Quinn agreed, relief flooding through him so intensely his knees felt weak. I will cook something better than field rations. And Jara, thank you for everything you did, for keeping me safe, for trusting me enough to stay now, thank you. She ducked her head, the gesture almost shy, and in the moonlight he saw the faint darkening of her cheeks that might have been a blush. You are a very strange man, so I have been told. He gestured toward his house, suddenly aware that dawn was still hours away, and he was standing in his yard in his work clothes with an orc woman who had just agreed to let him court her. The surreal quality of the entire situation threatened to overwhelm him. I should warn you, I am not much of a cook. Breakfast might be disappointing. I have eaten bark and insects, Jara said dryly, following him toward the door. I think I can manage whatever you produce. His house was small and plain, a single main room with a sleeping loft and a root cellar, furnished with things he had built himself or bought used from families leaving the frontier. He lit lamps while Jara stood uncertainly near the door, looking around with an expression he could not quite read. He wondered what she saw, whether the space seemed crude or lonely or simply human in some way that emphasized the difference between them. Sit anywhere, he offered, gesturing to the chairs near his fireplace. This will not take long. He had eggs from his chickens and bread he had baked 2 days ago, bacon from a pig he had traded for in the autumn, and early greens from his garden. He cooked with competent efficiency if not particular skill, aware of Jara watching him from where she had perched carefully on the edge of a chair as though ready to bolt. The silence between them felt heavy with unspoken things, but not uncomfortable. Quinn found himself hyper-aware of her presence in his space, the way she made his small house feel smaller simply by being in it, the way his heart still had not entirely calmed from the shock and rush of the last hour. When he set a plate in front of her, loaded with more food than he would normally eat himself, she blinked at it in surprise. This is too much. You have been spending your nights doing hard physical labor protecting my farm, Quinn said, settling into the chair across from her with his own smaller portion. You need to eat, and I did promise to feed you better than last time. Jara picked up her fork with a carefulness that made him think she was not entirely used to human utensils, but she managed well enough. She ate with the focused intensity of someone for whom hunger was still a recent enough memory to make food precious, and Quinn looked away to give her privacy in it, focusing on his own meal. The eggs had turned out decently. The bacon was perhaps slightly too crispy. The bread was definitely stale. None of it seemed to matter much. This is good, Jara said after she had cleared half her plate. You are better at cooking than you claimed. I've had a lot of practice feeding myself, Quinn replied. Living alone means you either learn to cook or you eat cold food forever. Tell me about your clan, the one you were exiled from, if that is not too painful a subject. She was quiet for a moment, chewing slowly, and he thought she might refuse. But then she swallowed and said, The Kaldor clan holds territory in the northern hills, 3 days' travel from here. We are a small clan, perhaps 60 strong, but proud. My father was the clan leader, My mother died when I was young. I was raised to be a warrior, to eventually lead in my own right." Her expression went distant, remembering. "I was good at it. I thought I understood honor and duty and the old ways. And then I made a mistake that my father could not forgive, and he cast me out in front of the entire clan. I have not spoken to any of them since." "What mistake?" Quinn asked gently. "I showed mercy to a human raiding party during the last conflicts before the peace." Jara's voice had gone flat again. "We had captured 3 men who had been burning orc settlements. By rights of war, they should have been executed. I argued for sending them back to their people as a gesture toward peace, since rumors of treaty talks were already spreading. My father saw it as weakness and betrayal. He said I had valued human lives over orc honor. He was not entirely wrong." Quinn felt something cold settle in his stomach. "He exiled you for trying to prevent more killing." "He exiled me for breaking with clan law and undermining his authority as leader, in front of other warriors, making him look weak." She met his eyes. "I do not entirely blame him. I knew what I was doing. I knew the cost. I chose to speak anyway because I believed the old ways were leading us toward destruction, and someone needed to say it. I just thought he might listen because I was his daughter. I was naive." "You were brave," Quinn corrected firmly. "You risked everything for what you believed was right." "That is not naivety, that is courage. Courage and naivety often look similar from the outside." But there was something soft in her expression now, a cautious warmth. "You were a soldier, yes. I saw the way you move, the way you positioned yourself downwind and used cover." "Militia," Quinn confirmed. 5 years on the frontier patrols during the worst of the conflicts. I saw things I wish I had not seen. Did things I wish I had not done. When the treaties were signed, I took my discharge and bought this farm with the coin I had saved. I wanted to grow things instead of burning them. I wanted quiet. And now you have an exiled orc visiting your house." Jara's mouth quirked. "Not very quiet, no," Quinn agreed and found himself smiling again. "But I think I prefer it anyway." They talked as the candles burned lower, the conversation wandering from farming to frontier life to the complications of the peace. Jara asked him about his crops and his livestock with genuine interest, and he asked her about orc customs and Northern Territory with the same. She was sharp and funny when she forgot to guard herself, with a dry wit that caught him off balance in the best way. He learned that she was skilled at tracking and hunting, that she had been living rough in the forest for 2 years, moving between territories and avoiding both orc and human settlements. He told her about his plans to expand his wheat fields, about the irrigation system he wanted to build, about the loneliness that sometimes ate at him during the winter months. When the first gray light of dawn began to show through his windows, Jara stood with visible reluctance. "I need to go before full light. If any of your neighbors happen by, it would be better if I am not seen." Quinn rose as well, not wanting her to leave but knowing she was right. "Tonight, then, you will come back. I said I would." She moved toward the door, then paused with her hand on the frame. "Quinn, that proposal, you meant it, did you not? It was not just shock speaking." "I meant it," he said quietly. "I know it was too soon and too sudden. I know I need to earn the right to ask you properly. But yes, I meant it." Every word. Jara looked at him for a long moment, something complicated moving behind her eyes. "I have never had someone propose to me before. I always thought if it happened it would be some arranged alliance between clans, all political and practical. I did not expect it to be a human farmer in his yard, offering me everything because I mended his fence. I am not good at doing things the expected way, clearly." But she was almost smiling. "I will see you tonight, Quinn Yardley. Have your questions ready. If we are truly courting, I want it done right. I want to know everything." "Everything," Quinn agreed. Tonight, he watched her slip out into the pale dawn, moving like a shadow toward the tree line, and stood in his doorway until she disappeared completely from view. Then he went back inside his too-quiet house and began cleaning up the breakfast dishes with hands that shook slightly from exhaustion and exhilaration, and the terrifying, exhilarating certainty that his entire life had just changed direction. The day passed with agonizing slowness. Quinn tried to work, going through his normal routines of feeding animals and checking fences and weeding his garden, but his mind refused to stay on task. He kept thinking about Jara's face in the moonlight, the careful way she had said his name, the old pain in her voice when she spoke of her exile. He thought about her father casting her out for showing mercy, and anger burned hot in his chest at the injustice of it. He thought about the fact that she had spent months guarding him in secret, repaying a kindness he had barely remembered doing, and felt humbled by that kind of dedication. He also, in his more honest moments, acknowledged that he had proposed marriage to a woman he had known for less than an hour, which suggested that either he was losing his mind or something about Jara Kaldor had reached past all his careful defenses and grabbed hold of something essential. He suspected both things were true. As sunset approached, Quinn made himself presentable and cooked a better dinner than breakfast had been. Venison stew with vegetables from his root cellar, fresh bread he had started that morning, early strawberries from his patch. He set the table for two and felt absurdly nervous, like a boy before his first courtship and not a man of 27 who had seen combat and run a farm alone for 3 years. Jara arrived just after full dark, stepping out of the forest with the same uncanny quietness. But this time she came to the front door and knocked, a deliberate human gesture, and when Quinn opened the door she was standing in the light of his porch lantern looking uncertain and determined at once. "Come in," he said, stepping back. "I made dinner." Actual dinner this time, not just breakfast food. "It smells good." She entered more easily than she had the night before, though she still moved with a carefulness that suggested she was very aware of being in his space. She had changed clothes, he noticed, trading yesterday's worn traveling leathers for a simple shirt and trousers that looked newer, and her hair had been rebraided with obvious care. The thought that she had dressed up for him made his chest tight. They ate together at his small table, and the conversation came easier than it had in the pre-dawn hours, as though the awkwardness of the first meeting had burned away, leaving something more solid behind. Quinn asked about her life before exile, and Jara told him stories of growing up in her clan, of learning to fight from her father, and learning to track from an old warrior named Gresh, who had served 3 generations of Kaldor leaders. She described the northern hills with obvious longing, the way the autumn light turned the valleys gold, the winter festivals where the whole clan would gather. He heard the homesickness in her voice and ached for it. In return, he told her about his own childhood in a small farming community 2 territories over, about the restlessness that had driven him to join the militia, about the slow realization during the war that he was fighting for land and politics, while people on both sides died for it. He told her about the day he had found her in his barn 2 years ago, which he remembered better now that he knew why it mattered. He had been struggling that season, lonely and uncertain, and there had been something about her desperation that had struck him as deeply human despite her orcish features. He had not been able to turn her away hungry. "I did not think you would remember," Jara said quietly. "It was just a moment. You were kind and I was gone. I thought I was nothing to you." "I remember thinking you looked like I felt," Quinn replied. "Lost and trying hard not to show it. I could not let you go like that." He reached across the table slowly, giving her time to pull away, and rested his hand palm up near hers. I am glad you survived. I am glad you came back, even if the circumstances are complicated." Jara looked at his hand for a long moment, then carefully placed her own over it. Her palm was warm and calloused, larger than his, and the simple contact sent a wave of feeling through him that was entirely out of proportion to the gesture. They sat like that in silence, hands touching across the dinner table, and Quinn thought it might be the most intimate moment of his entire life. "Tell me honestly," Jara said after a while. "When you proposed last night, what did you think would happen? Did you think I would just say yes and that would be the end of it?" Quinn felt heat creep up his neck. "I was not thinking at all. I saw you, and I felt something, and the words came out before my brain could catch up. If I had been thinking, I would have realized it was an insane thing to say to someone I had just met. But I cannot bring myself to regret it, because if I had not said it, maybe you would have disappeared and I would never have gotten this chance to know you. You could have just asked me to stay." "Would you have?" She considered that, her thumb moving absently against his knuckles. "I do not know. Maybe. Maybe not. I was frightened last night. I had been caught and my debt was exposed, and you were looking at me like you saw something worth keeping. No one has looked at me like that since my exile. It was terrifying. And now I am still terrified," Jara admitted, "but also curious. Also interested in seeing where this goes if we are both brave enough or stupid enough to try. You said you wanted to court me properly. What does that mean to you?" Quinn had been thinking about this all day. "It means spending time together, learning who you are beyond the brave woman who guards farms and the exiled warrior. It means letting you learn who I am beyond the farmer who cannot cook breakfast properly. It means being honest about what we want and what we can offer. It means taking the time to build something real instead of rushing into something neither of us is ready for." "That sounds reasonable." Jara's ears flicked forward, a gesture he was learning meant interest or approval. "What about the practical complications? I am still in exile, you are still human. Eventually people will notice if I am visiting regularly." "Let them notice," Quinn said, then reconsidered. "Or rather, we deal with that when it becomes a problem." "You said there would be consequences if your people discovered you were courting. What kind of consequences?" Jara's expression darkened. "At best, they would reinforce my exile, make it known among all the orc clans that I am to be shunned. At worst, if my father felt I was dishonoring the clan further, he might send warriors to bring me back for formal punishment. Exile is supposed to mean cutting all ties, accepting that you are no longer part of clan or culture. Attempting to marry to form new bonds could be seen as rejecting the terms of exile. That is barbaric. That is our law." She squeezed his hand, not quite gently. "I do not agree with it. I think many of our laws are harsh and outdated. But I cannot change them simply by wishing they were different. If we do this, Quinn, if we truly pursue a courtship, we need to be prepared for the possibility that my clan will find out and I will face consequences." Quinn turned that over in his mind, testing the weight of it. "What if we went to your clan? What if we asked them to lift your exile?" Jara pulled her hand back as though burned. "No, absolutely not. My father made his position clear. He would never lift the exile, especially not for the purpose of letting me marry a human. It would be seen as the ultimate rejection of orc ways. What if you did not ask him? What if you asked the clan as a whole? That is not how it works. The clan leader's word is law. There is no appealing to the group over his head." But something flickered in her expression, uncertainty or hope or both. "Is there truly no mechanism for ending an exile?" Quinn pressed. "No conditions under which someone can be welcomed back?" Jara was quiet for a long time, her brow furrowed in thought. "There are stories," she said slowly. "Old stories from before the conflicts. of exiles who performed great services and were welcomed back, of exiles who reconciled with those they had wronged. But those are legends, Quinn. They are not real precedent. Every precedent was new once, Quinn said. If we want this to work, if we want a future where you are free to make your own choices, we need to find a way to end your exile. Not just ignore it or work around it, but actually resolve it. Otherwise, it will always be hanging over us. You are talking about changing my entire clan's perception and potentially confronting my father. Jara's voice was sharp with stress. You are talking about walking into orc territory as a human and asking them to overturn an exile that was meant to be permanent. Do you understand how dangerous that would be? How unlikely to succeed? I understand that you deserve better than living in the shadows, Quinn said quietly. I understand that you showed mercy when it mattered and you were punished for it, and that is wrong. I understand that if we want a real future together, we need to do the hard work of making it possible. And yes, I understand it will be dangerous and probably futile. But I also know that you are worth the attempt. Jara stared at him with an expression caught between frustration and something softer, more vulnerable. You barely know me. How can you be so certain I am worth this kind of risk? I know what I need to know, Quinn said. I know your character. I know your heart. The rest is just details we learn along the way. Tell me I am wrong. Tell me you do not want to find a way back to your people, back to the life you should have had. Of course I want that. Her voice cracked slightly. I have wanted it every day for 2 years. I dream about the hills and my clan and being welcomed home. But wanting something does not make it possible, Quinn. Sometimes exile is permanent. Sometimes there is no fixing what has been broken. And sometimes there is, Quinn countered. But we will never know unless we try. I am not saying we march up to your clan tomorrow and demand they take you back. I am saying we start thinking about it. We start planning. We spend this courtship not just learning about each other, but figuring out how to build a future that does not require you to be separated from your people forever. If it turns out to be impossible, at least we will know we tried. Jara pushed back from the table and stood, pacing to his window and back with restless energy. Quinn watched her move, seeing the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands clenched and unclenched at her sides. When she finally stopped and looked at him again, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, raw and honest. "Why do you care so much about my exile? You could court me as I am. We could build something quiet and hidden. Why push for more?" "Because you deserve more," Quinn said simply. "Because I saw your face when you talked about your home, and you looked like you were mourning. Because if I am asking you to tie your life to mine, I want to give you back everything you lost, not just offer you a different kind of isolation. Because I think you are extraordinary, Jara Kaldor, and I do not want you to spend the rest of your life punished for being brave." She made a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and covered her face with her hands. "You are going to break my heart, Quinn Yardley. You are going to make me hope for impossible things, and then I am going to lose you and lose the hope and be worse off than when I started." Quinn stood and crossed to her, stopping just within reach but not touching yet. "Or we are going to find a way through this together, and you are going to get your life back, and we are going to build something neither of us expected. That is possible too. That is the least likely outcome. Maybe." He reached up slowly and gently pulled her hands away from her face, holding them between his own. "But I would rather aim for unlikely and wonderful than settle for certain and half-lived. Stay with me in this, Jara. Let me stand with you. Let us be stupid and brave together." She looked at their joined hands, then up at his face, searching for something he hoped she found. Then she leaned forward and rested her forehead against his shoulder, a gesture of trust that made his throat tight. He wrapped his arms around her carefully. Feeling the strength in her frame and the slight tremor that spoke of tears she was trying not to shed. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the lamplight of his small house. And Quinn felt the certainty settle deeper into his bones that this was right, that she was right, that whatever it took to make this work would be worth it. "I do not know how to do this," Jara whispered against his shoulder. "I do not know how to let someone care for me like this. I have been alone for so long." "We learn together," Quinn said into her hair. "That is what courting is for, learning how to fit together. Learning what we need and what we can give. We take it slow, like you said. We do it right." She pulled back enough to look at him, her eyes still wet but no longer on the edge of spilling over. "Slow means no more sudden proposals." "No more sudden proposals," Quinn agreed. "The next time I ask you to marry me, it will be because we both know it is right and because you are free to say yes without your exile hanging over you. I promise." "That is a large promise. I know." He brushed a thumb across her cheek, wiping away the dampness there. "But I mean it. Every word." Jara leaned into his touch for a moment, then stepped back, visibly gathering herself. "I should go. It is late and you have work tomorrow." "Will you come back, tomorrow night or the night after?" "Tomorrow," she said. "And the night after that." "And the night after that, until you get tired of me appearing on your doorstep." "That will never happen." She smiled at that, small and genuine, and it transformed her whole face into something radiant. "We will see. You have not heard me complain about your cooking yet." "My cooking is perfectly adequate," Quinn protested, walking her to the door. "Your bread was stale this morning." "That is because I baked it 2 days ago. Fresh bread tomorrow, I promise." They stood in the doorway, neither quite willing to end the evening, until finally Jara reached out and squeezed his hand once. "Thank you, Quinn, for dinner, for listening, for not giving up on me even when I am difficult." "You are not difficult," Quinn said. "You are cautious, and you have every reason to be. I will earn your trust, Jara, however long it takes." She left then, slipping away into the darkness, and Quinn stood watching until he could no longer distinguish her from the shadows. Then he went back inside and lay awake in his loft for hours, mind spinning with plans and possibilities, and the memory of her forehead against his shoulder. The pattern established itself over the following weeks. Jara came every night after sunset, and they ate dinner together and talked for hours. Slowly, carefully, they learned each other. Quinn discovered that Jara had a passion for music and could sing in a low, haunting register that made his chest ache. She learned that he had a terrible habit of starting projects without finishing them, and his barn was full of half-completed repairs and inventions. He found out that she was deadly with a bow and enjoyed the meditative focus of hunting. She discovered that he had a dry sense of humor that emerged when he was comfortable, and he could make her laugh with carefully timed observations about his livestock's personalities. They also talked seriously about the exile and what it would take to challenge it. Jara explained more about orc clan structure, how leadership passed through bloodlines but could be contested, how disputes were meant to be handled through formal challenge or mediation, how exile was considered one of the harshest punishments because it meant total separation from community and culture. Quinn asked questions and took notes and began to formulate ideas that Jara immediately shot down as too dangerous or politically complex. "You cannot just walk into clan territory and demand a hearing," she insisted one evening in the 3rd week of their courtship. "You are human. You have no standing. They would as likely kill you as listen to you." "What if I had an orc advocate?" Quinn asked. "Someone who could speak for me, who has standing in the community." "I do not know anyone who would do that. Most orcs who knew me before exile would consider me dead to them." "That is how it works. What about Gresh, the warrior who taught you to track? You said he was old and respected. Would he listen? Jara went very still. Gresh was kind to me when I was young, but he did not speak against my exile. He stood silent when my father cast me out. Standing silent is not the same as agreeing, Quinn pointed out. Maybe he regrets it. Maybe he would be willing to help now, especially if we approach him carefully. Or maybe he would turn us in to my father immediately, and I would face formal punishment instead of just exile. But Jara's ears were forward, engaged despite her protests. It is dangerous, Quinn. Everything worth doing is dangerous, he replied. But we do not have to decide now. We keep thinking. We keep planning. When we are ready, we move. As spring deepened into early summer, Quinn found himself happier than he could remember being in years. His days were full of farm work, and his nights were full of Jara, and the combination felt like a life finally coming into focus. He caught himself smiling while doing chores, planning meals she might enjoy, counting the hours until sunset. His neighbors would have been shocked to see the change in him, but his neighbors rarely visited, and he was careful to give them no reason to become more curious. Jara bloomed under the attention in ways that were beautiful to watch. She relaxed incrementally, laughing more easily, touching him more freely, letting herself be cared for. She started arriving earlier in the evenings and leaving later in the mornings, until she was spending nearly every night at his farm. They had not been intimate beyond careful kisses and sleeping beside each other in his loft, both aware that they wanted more but agreeing to wait until the future was more certain. The restraint was difficult, but it also felt right, like they were building a foundation strong enough to support whatever came after. 2 months into their courtship, Quinn woke one morning to find Jara standing at his window, staring toward the north with an expression of profound longing. He came up behind her quietly, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. "Home," she said. "I was thinking about the summer gathering. It will be happening soon, all the northern clans coming together for trade and games and celebrations. I have not seen it in 2 years. I miss it so much it hurts." Quinn tightened his arms around her. "Then we should go." She turned in his embrace, eyes wide. "What?" "We should go to the gathering. Not to your clan specifically, but to the event. We present ourselves as a couple, openly. We show the clans that you are alive and well and building a life. We start changing the narrative around your exile." "That is insane," Jara said flatly. "That would put us directly in the path of my father and every warrior who stood witness to my exile. We would be risking everything." "We are already risking everything," Quinn countered. "Every night you spend here is a risk. Every moment we build toward a future together is a risk. At least this way we take control of the narrative instead of hiding from it. We show up together, proudly, and we force people to see you as more than just an exile. We start building support among other clans, other orcs who might question whether your punishment fit your crime." Jara pulled away from him, agitation clear in every line of her body. "You do not understand orc politics. My presence at the gathering would be seen as a provocation. My father would have every right to confront me, possibly to challenge me. And you being there with me, a human claiming courtship with an exile, would only make it worse. Or it would make people question," Quinn said. "You told me yourself that you were punished for showing mercy, for arguing toward peace. What if there are other orcs who agreed with you but were too afraid to speak? What if seeing you alive and thriving despite exile gives them courage to question the old ways? We cannot build a future by hiding, Jara. At some point, we have to step into the light." She stared at him for a long moment, conflict warring across her features. Then she sank down onto the edge of his bed, dropping her head into her hands. "You are asking me to face my father." to stand in front of my entire clan, and every clan allied with them, and declare that I reject their judgment. That is what appearing at the gathering would mean. Quinn sat beside her, taking one of her hands in his. I am asking you to stop accepting a punishment you did not deserve. I am asking you to fight for the life you want instead of settling for the life exile forced on you. And I am promising that I will stand beside you while you do it, every step of the way. You will not face them alone. A human standing beside me will only make their anger worse. Maybe, Quinn acknowledged. Or maybe it will prove that you were right to argue for peace and understanding between our peoples. Maybe it will show them that the world is changing whether they want it to or not. We cannot know unless we try, Jara. But I know I cannot ask you to marry me while you are still living under the shadow of exile. I need to know we did everything possible to free you from it first. Jara looked at him with eyes that held fear and hope and a desperate kind of trust. If this goes wrong, if they reject us or attack us, we could both die. You understand that, yes? This is not a symbolic gesture. This is genuinely dangerous. I understand, Quinn said steadily. And I am asking you to do it anyway, because the alternative is living half a life forever, and I do not think either of us can accept that anymore. She was quiet for a long time, her hand tight in his. Then she took a deep breath and straightened her shoulders. The gathering is in 3 weeks at the traditional grounds in the northern valleys. If we are going to do this, we need to prepare. We need to understand exactly what we are walking into and have a plan for every possible response. And Quinn, she turned to look at him directly. If my father challenges me to formal combat, you have to let me face him alone. That is orc law. You cannot interfere. I do not like that, Quinn said. I do not either, but those are the terms. Promise me. He studied her face, seeing the determination there, and nodded slowly. I promise. But Jara, if it comes to that, you fight to win, no holding back because he is your father, you fight for us. A fierce smile crossed her face. I was trained by him. I know every move he favors. If it comes to combat, I will win. They spent the next 3 weeks preparing. Quinn traded for better clothes suitable for a formal gathering, and Jara showed him basic orc customs and protocols, so he would not accidentally give offense. She taught him greetings in the orc tongue and explained the significance of various gestures and rituals. He listened and practiced, and tried not to think too hard about the fact that he was preparing to walk into what might well be hostile territory with nothing but his determination and his love for Jara as protection. They also talked through contingencies. What to do if Jara's father refused to acknowledge them? What to do if other clans were receptive, but the Kaldor clan remained hostile? What to do if violence broke out? Quinn secured a promise from Jara that if things went truly badly, she would leave with him rather than face punishment alone out of some sense of honor. She agreed reluctantly, and he was not entirely certain she would keep the promise if tested, but it was better than nothing. The night before they were set to leave, Jara stood in Quinn's farmyard looking at the place she had guarded for months with visible emotion. I need to tell you something, she said quietly. Before we go, before we risk everything. I need you to know that these months with you have been the happiest of my life. Whatever happens at the gathering, whatever comes after, I do not regret any of it. You gave me back hope when I thought I had none left. That is a gift I can never repay. Quinn stepped close and cupped her face in his hands, looking into her eyes. You do not need to repay it. You just need to stay with me. Whatever comes, we face it together. That is all I need. She kissed him then, deep and intense, and he kissed her back with everything he had been holding in reserve for weeks. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she rested her forehead against his. After the gathering, she whispered. After we resolve this one way or another. Ask me again. Ask you what? Quinn said, though he knew. You know what? She pulled back enough to smile at him. Ask me properly this time when I am free to say yes. That is a promise, he said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. They left at dawn, traveling north on foot through territory that grew progressively wilder and more beautiful. Quinn had borrowed a sturdy pack horse to carry their supplies, and they made good time despite the rough terrain. Jara moved through the wilderness with an ease that spoke of deep familiarity, pointing out landmarks and old trails, and Quinn could see the way her spirits lifted the closer they got to her homeland. She belonged here in a way she never quite had on his farm, and he made a mental note of it, understanding that any future they built would need to honor her connection to this place. On the evening of the third day, they crested a ridge and looked down into a wide valley where hundreds of tents and pavilions had been erected in careful clan groupings. Cook fires dotted the encampment like fallen stars, and the sound of voices and music drifted up to them on the wind. Jara stopped dead, her whole body going rigid, and Quinn saw tears tracking down her face. I did not think I would ever see this again, she said, her voice breaking. I thought I was cut off from this forever. Quinn took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. You are here now. We are both here. Whatever happens next, no one can take this moment from you. She gripped his hand hard enough to hurt and nodded, visibly gathering herself. Then together they began the descent into the valley, toward the gathering and whatever fate waited for them there. The reaction to their arrival was immediate and electric. Orcs who saw them approaching stopped what they were doing to stare, the word spreading like wildfire through the encampment. Jara Kaldor, the exile, had returned, and she had brought a human with her. By the time they reached the edge of the main gathering area, a crowd had formed, dozens of orcs watching in silence that felt more dangerous than any shouting. Jara kept her head high and her shoulders back, every inch the warrior she had been raised to be. Quinn stayed close beside her, very aware of the hostile looks being directed his way but refusing to show fear. They had agreed that Jara would do the talking unless directly addressed, since his presence was already provocative enough without him claiming any kind of authority. An older orc pushed through the crowd, his face marked with ritual scars and his posture radiating authority. Quinn recognized him from Jara's descriptions. Gresh, the warrior who had taught her to track. The old orc's eyes widened when he saw Jara, and something complicated flickered across his expression. Jara Kaldor, Gresh said, his voice carrying across the sudden silence. You were exiled from the clans. You have no right to be here. I have every right, Jara replied, her voice steady and clear. I am still orc, still born of the northern clans. Exile does not erase blood or history. I have come to the gathering because I am tired of hiding and because I want to speak to those who will listen. You bring a human to our sacred gathering, another voice called from the crowd. You dishonor us with your presence. I bring my partner, Jara corrected. Quinn Yardley, who has shown me more honor and kindness than my own clan did when they cast me out for advocating peace. I am not here to fight or to cause trouble. I am here to ask the gathered clans to hear me, to question whether my exile was just, and to consider whether it is time to acknowledge that not all of our old ways serve us anymore. The crowd erupted in muttering, some voices angry, others thoughtful. Quinn saw heads turning, orcs conferring with each other in low voices. The moment hung on a knife's edge and he found himself holding his breath. Then the crowd parted, and a large orc with graying hair and the same fierce features as Jara stepped forward. Her father. Quinn recognized him from the cold fury in his eyes and the way Jara's whole body tensed like a drawn bow. Daughter, the orc leader said, and the word sounded like a curse. You dare show your face here after I cast you out? You dare bring your human pet to our gathering and demand we question my judgment? I dare to stand for what I believe is right, Jara said, her voice not wavering though Quinn could feel her trembling. I dared it 2 years ago when I argued for mercy. I dare it now when I say that exiling me for showing compassion was wrong, and that the clans need to change if we are to survive in this new era of peace. Her father's face darkened with rage. You speak of survival while standing beside a human. You speak of peace while dishonoring everything our people stand for. I should have ended you instead of simply exiling you. Perhaps it is not too late to correct that mistake. The threat hung in the air, and Quinn felt his hand move toward the knife at his belt before he caught himself. Jara had made him promise not to interfere. He had to trust her. If you want to challenge me, father, then do so formally, Jara said. Challenge me to combat before the gathered clans. Let them witness whether your old ways are stronger than the new path I have chosen. But do not make threats you are not prepared to back up. Her father smiled, cold and dangerous. Very well. I, Thuron Kaldor, clan leader of the Kaldor, formally challenge you to single combat to answer for your dishonor. The fight will be to first blood or yield. The gathered clans will bear witness. Do you accept? Quinn's heart hammered in his chest. This was the worst possible outcome, the scenario they had hoped to avoid. But Jara stood tall, and when she spoke her voice rang out clear and strong. I accept your challenge, father. We fight at dawn tomorrow, before all the clans. And when I win, you will acknowledge that my exile was unjust and that I have the right to make my own choices about my life and my future. When I win, Thuron countered, you will leave these lands forever and never return. And your human will leave with you or die here. Jara glanced at Quinn, and he gave her a tiny nod of support. She turned back to her father. Agreed, dawn tomorrow, the combat grounds, the clans will witness. The crowd erupted in conversation, the gathered orcs splitting into groups to discuss this unexpected development. Gresh stepped forward again, his expression unreadable. I will serve as witness and arbiter for the combat, he said formally. Both parties will have the night to prepare. The fight begins at first light. Jara inclined her head in acknowledgement, and then she turned and walked through the crowd with Quinn close behind. Orcs parted to let them pass, some looking hostile, others curious, a few openly sympathetic. They made their way to the edge of the encampment where visitors from other territories had set up camp, and a young orc woman approached them cautiously. I have a tent you can use, she said quietly. I am from the Ironwood clan. We are not allied with the Kaldor. What you did 2 years ago, speaking for mercy, my clan leader agreed with you, privately. We think you were right. Thank you, Jara said, and Quinn could hear the emotion she was trying to keep out of her voice. The tent was small but clean, with bedrolls and a fire pit outside. As soon as they were alone, Quinn pulled Jara into his arms and held her tight. You were incredible out there, brave and strong and perfect. I am terrified, Jara admitted against his shoulder. My father is a formidable fighter. I am not certain I can beat him. You can, Quinn said fiercely. You were trained by him, which means you know his style. You are younger and faster. And you are fighting for something he does not understand, the right to choose your own life. That gives you strength he cannot match. She pulled back to look at him, her eyes searching his face. If I lose, you have to leave. Promise me you will not try to fight them. Promise me you will go back to your farm and live the life you deserve. I am not making that promise, Quinn said flatly. If you lose, we leave together or not at all. Those are the only options I will accept. Quinn, no. He cut her off gently but firmly. We are in this together, remember. Whatever comes, we face it together. You do not get to send me away to protect me. That is not how this works." Jara stared at him, and then she laughed, a slightly desperate sound. "You are the most stubborn man I have ever met. I am choosing to take that as a compliment." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the tip of her nose. "Get some rest. Tomorrow you show your father and all the clans exactly what kind of warrior you are. Tomorrow you win your freedom." They spent the night holding each other, neither sleeping much, both acutely aware that the next day would determine the entire course of their future. Quinn memorized the feel of her in his arms, the sound of her breathing, the way her hand gripped his shirt like an anchor. He prayed to gods he barely believed in that she would be safe, that she would win, that they would have the chance to build the life they both wanted. When dawn began to lighten the sky, they rose and prepared together. Jara dressed in simple fighting leathers, tying her hair back in a tight braid. Quinn helped her check her weapons, though the combat would be with staves rather than blades to minimize the risk of fatal injury. She was quiet and focused, her face set in lines of grim determination, and he could see the warrior she had been before exile emerging fully. The combat grounds were a flat area at the center of the encampment, ringed by stones and already surrounded by what looked like every orc in the valley. The crowd parted to let them through, and Quinn felt hundreds of eyes on them as they walked to the center where Gresh waited with Jara's father. Thuron was dressed similarly to Jara, and he held his staff with casual competence that spoke of decades of experience. He looked at his daughter with an expression of cold contempt that made Quinn want to plant his fist in the older orc's face. Gresh stepped forward, raising his hands for silence. "We are gathered to witness formal combat between Thuron Kaldor, clan leader, and Jara Kaldor, exile. The challenge is to answer for honor. The combat is to first blood or yield. The terms have been agreed. If Thuron wins, Jara and her human leave these lands forever. If Jara wins, her exile is acknowledged as unjust and she regains the right to make her own choices. Does anyone contest these terms?" Silence greeted the question. Gresh nodded and gestured to both fighters. "Take your positions. The combat begins at my signal." Quinn stepped back to the edge of the ring, his heart in his throat. Jara and her father circled each other, staves held ready, and the entire valley seemed to hold its breath. "Begin," Gresh called. Thuron attacked first, a brutal overhead strike that Jara barely deflected. The crack of wood on wood echoed across the valley, and then they were both moving, a blur of strikes and counters that demonstrated exactly why they were both considered formidable warriors. Thuron fought with raw power and aggression, trying to overwhelm Jara with sheer force. Jara fought with speed and precision, using her father's momentum against him, looking for openings. They broke apart, both breathing hard, neither having landed a solid hit. Quinn's hands were clenched into fists, every muscle in his body tight with the effort of not interfering. He could see the strain on Jara's face, the way she was already tiring from deflecting her father's heavy blows. "You cannot win," Thuron growled, loud enough for the crowd to hear. "You are weak. You always were, too soft to lead, too human-hearted to be orc." "Being compassionate does not make me weak," Jara shot back, circling carefully. "It makes me strong enough to change, which is more than you have ever been." Thuron's face twisted with rage, and he lunged with a combination of strikes that drove Jara back toward the edge of the ring. She deflected desperately, her staff work flawless but clearly defensive. Quinn's breath caught as one of Thuron's strikes slipped through and caught Jara's shoulder, hard enough to leave a bruise but not draw blood. She stumbled, and Thuron pressed his advantage, raining blows that forced her to her knees. "Yield," Thuron commanded. "Yield and leave with your human. It is the best offer you will get." Jara looked up at her father, and Quinn saw something shift in her expression. The fear and doubt drained away, replaced by a cold clarity. When she spoke, her voice carried across the silent valley. "I will never yield to you again. I spent 2 years believing I deserved exile because you told me I did. I spent 2 years alone and ashamed because I showed mercy when you wanted blood. But I was right, Father. I was right to argue for peace. I was right to value life over outdated honor codes. And I am right now to fight for the future I want instead of accepting the punishment you decided I deserved." She surged to her feet with explosive speed, her staff spinning in a pattern Quinn had never seen her practice. Thuron tried to counter, but he was off balance from his aggressive stance, and Jara's strike caught him hard in the ribs. He grunted and swung back, but Jara was already moving, flowing around his attack and landing a sharp jab to his knee that made him stagger. Her staff was a blur now, striking from unexpected angles, using techniques that were clearly not orc traditional fighting. "What is this?" Thuron demanded, breathing heavily. "This is not how I taught you to fight." "No," Jara agreed, her voice steady despite her exertion. "This is what I learned after exile when I had to adapt to survive. This is what happens when you combine orc warrior training with 2 years of fighting alone against every threat the wilderness could throw at me. You made me stronger by casting me out, Father. You just did not realize it." She pressed her attack relentlessly now, and Thuron was forced onto the defensive for the first time. Quinn could see the older orc tiring, his movements becoming slower, his breathing labored. Jara was tired too, sweat running down her face and her arms shaking with effort, but she had momentum and determination on her side. Thuron made a desperate lunge, overextending in an attempt to land a decisive blow. Jara sidestepped smoothly and brought her staff down hard on his extended wrist. There was a sharp crack, and Thuron's staff went flying. Before he could recover, Jara swept his legs out from under him and planted the end of her staff against his throat, not hard enough to choke but firmly enough to make the point. They froze in that position, Thuron on his back and Jara standing over him, both breathing hard. "Do you yield?" Jara asked quietly. The valley was completely silent. Every orc in the gathering was watching, waiting for Thuron's response. The old clan leader's face was twisted with rage and humiliation, but slowly, reluctantly, he nodded. "I yield," he ground out. Jara stepped back and lowered her staff. Gresh moved forward immediately, raising his voice to be heard across the valley. "Jara Kaldor has won the challenge. By the terms agreed, her exile is acknowledged as unjust and she regains the right to make her own choices. The gathered clans bear witness." A murmur ran through the crowd, some orcs nodding approval, others looking disgruntled, but no one contested Gresh's pronouncement. It was done. The exile was lifted. Quinn pushed through to Jara, catching her as her legs gave out from exhaustion and emotion. She clung to him, shaking, and he held her up with his arms around her waist. "You did it," he said fiercely into her ear. "You won. You are free." "I am free," she repeated as though testing the words. Then she started laughing, a wild, joyous sound, and he laughed with her, both of them giddy with relief and triumph. Thuron had climbed to his feet, cradling his injured wrist, and he stood staring at his daughter with an expression Quinn could not fully read. Then he turned and walked away through the crowd, which parted silently to let him pass. Several orcs from the Kaldor clan followed him, but Quinn noticed that several others stayed behind, watching Jara with what looked like tentative pride. Gresh approached them, his weathered face creasing into a small smile. "That was well fought, Jara. You have grown strong in your exile." "Your mother would have been proud." Jara straightened, wiping her eyes. Thank you, Gresh, for serving as arbiter, for giving me a fair chance. I did not give you anything, Gresh said. You earned it yourself. He turned to Quinn, studying him with sharp eyes. You are the human who stands with her. I am Quinn Yardley, Quinn confirmed, meeting the old orc's gaze steadily. And yes, I stand with Jara. I intend to keep standing with her if she will have me. Humans and orcs courting openly, Gresh mused. The world is changing faster than I expected. But perhaps that is not a bad thing. The clans need to change or we will be left behind by history. He nodded to Jara. You are welcome to visit the Calder territory again, though I cannot promise your father will greet you warmly. The exile is lifted, but reconciliation will take time. I understand, Jara said. Thank you. As Gresh walked away, other orcs began to approach, some offering congratulations, others simply wanting to speak with the exile who had returned and won her freedom. The young woman from the Ironwood clan appeared with food and water, and several older orcs engaged Jara in careful conversations about the challenge and its implications. Quinn stayed close, shaking hands and accepting wary greetings, aware that his presence was still unusual but no longer actively threatening now that Jara's status had been restored. They spent the rest of the day at the gathering, and Quinn watched Jara reconnect with pieces of her past she had thought lost forever. She spoke with old friends and rivals. She shared news with orcs from other clans. She slowly began to relax into being part of the community again. It was beautiful to witness, and it confirmed everything Quinn had believed about why lifting the exile was necessary. Jara belonged here among her people, and she also belonged with him. The future they would build needed to honor both truths. As evening fell and the gathering settled into celebration, Jara pulled Quinn away from the crowds to a quiet spot overlooking the valley. The sun was setting behind the western ridges, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, and the sounds of music and laughter drifted up from below. This morning I thought I might die today, Jara said softly, or at best, that I would be leaving this place forever. Now I am standing here free with my exile lifted and my people willing to accept me again. It does not feel real. It is real, Quinn said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. You made it real. You fought for it and won. We fought for it, she corrected. I would never have had the courage to come here without you. I would have lived in the shadows forever, too afraid to challenge my exile. You gave me the strength to believe I deserved more. Quinn turned her in his arms so they were facing each other. The sunset light caught in her eyes and turned her green skin golden, and he thought he had never seen anything more beautiful in his life. His heart was hammering, but this time it was not from fear or stress. It was from anticipation and certainty and love so strong it felt like it might break him open. Jara Calder, he said, and his voice only shook a little. 2 months ago I asked you to marry me in my farmyard in the middle of the night, and you told me it was the most ridiculous thing anyone had ever said to you. You were right. It was too soon, too sudden, born from surprise and ignorance. But you also told me to ask you again when you were free to say yes. So I am asking now, properly this time, with full knowledge of who you are and what we have built together. I love you. I love your strength and your courage and your fierce heart. I love the way you laugh and the way you fight and the way you sing when you think no one is listening. I want to spend my life with you, building a home that honors both your people and mine, growing old together on that farm you guarded so faithfully. Will you marry me? Jara's eyes had gone bright with tears, and her smile was wide enough to show her tusks. Yes, she said, clear and strong. Yes, Quinn Yardley, I will marry you. I will stand with you and build a life with you and love you for as long as we both live. Yes. He kissed her then, deep and thorough and full of promise, and she kissed him back with equal intensity. Somewhere below them, the orcs were celebrating the gathering, but here on the ridge it was just the two of them, holding each other as the sun set on one chapter of their lives and rose on another. They were married a month later at Quinn's farm, on a late summer evening when the wheat was golden and ready for harvest. The ceremony was small but meaningful, blending human and orc traditions in ways that honored both their heritages. Gresh came to represent the orc clans, along with a handful of other orcs who had supported Jara's return. Quinn's few neighbors attended, looking bemused but genuine in their well wishes. Thuron did not come, but he had sent word through Gresh that he acknowledged the marriage even if he did not approve, which Jara said was more than she had expected. They spoke their vows standing in the farmyard, where Quinn had first caught Jara guarding his fences, where he had blurted out that ridiculous first proposal. Jara wore a dress in the orc style, beautifully made in shades of green and gold, and Quinn wore his best clothes with an orc blessing token braided into his hair. They promised to stand together through whatever challenges came, to honor each other's people and ways, to build a home that was truly theirs. When Gresh pronounced them married by both human and orc law, the small gathering cheered, and Quinn pulled his wife into his arms and kissed her thoroughly while their friends applauded. Jara laughed against his mouth, and he thought he could happily spend the rest of his life making her laugh like that, joyous and free. The celebration afterward was simple but warm. They shared food and drink, and someone produced a drum so there could be music. Jara danced with several of the orc guests in traditional styles, and then she pulled Quinn into a dance that was part orc, part human, and entirely their own invention. They stumbled and laughed and held each other close, and Quinn felt a happiness so complete, it seemed impossible that just a few months ago he had been alone on this farm, lonely and uncertain. As the evening wound down and their guests began to depart, Gresh pulled them aside for a private word. "You have done something important here," he said seriously. "Not just getting married, though that is significant enough. You have shown both our peoples that the barriers between us are not as fixed as we thought. You have proven that exile can be challenged, that old ways can change, that humans and orcs can build lives together. Other couples will follow your example. Other exiles will find courage in your story. You have started something larger than yourselves." "We just wanted to be together," Jara said, but there was pride in her voice. "The best revolutions start that way," Gresh replied with a small smile. "With people who simply want to live and love as they choose. Guard that fierceness, both of you. The road ahead will not always be easy. But I believe you are strong enough to walk it together." After the last guest had left, Quinn and Jara stood in the doorway of their home, looking out at the farm that was now truly theirs. The moon was rising, bright and full, silvering the fields and forests. It was the same view Quinn had seen 1,000 times before, but everything felt different now. He was not alone anymore. He had a wife who had guarded this place before he even knew her name, who had fought for the right to build a life with him, who stood beside him now as an equal partner in all things. "I am glad you caught me that night," Jara said softly. "I am glad you would not let me disappear." "I am glad you came back," Quinn replied. "I am glad you were brave enough to stay and let me know you." They went inside together, closing the door on the night and the watching world, and began the work of building their married life together. In the days and weeks and years that followed, they would face challenges and joys in equal measure. They would navigate the complexities of living between two cultures, would host other mixed couples who came seeking advice and community, would work to build bridges between human and orc settlements in their region. Jara would eventually reconcile with some members of her clan, though the relationship with her father would remain distant and complicated. Quinn would expand his farm with Jara's help, and they would become known throughout the frontier as fair traders and fierce protectors of those who sought refuge. But on that wedding night, they simply held each other in the small house that had become their shared home, in the farmyard that Jara had once guarded in secret, and felt the profound rightness of two lives finally woven together. Quinn looked at his wife's face in the lamplight, traced the line of her jaw and the curve of her small tusks, and felt gratitude so deep it bordered on prayer. He had set out to catch his mysterious guardian and had found instead a partner, a love, a whole future he had never imagined possible. "I love you," he said, because the words needed to be spoken even though she already knew. "I love you too," Jara replied, pulling him close. "My strange, stubborn human who proposed to me in the middle of the night and then spent months fighting to make it possible. I love you so much." They made love that night for the first time as husband and wife, slow and tender, and full of the kind of vulnerability that only comes with absolute trust. Afterward, they lay tangled together in Quinn's loft, which was now their loft, talking quietly about plans for the future. Jara wanted to build a larger barn. Quinn wanted to plant an orchard. They both wanted to create a place where anyone, human or orc, would feel welcome and safe. "We should get chickens," Jara said sleepily. "More chickens. A whole flock. I've gotten very good at protecting chickens." Quinn laughed softly. "You have indeed, the best chicken guardian on the frontier." "I also want a garden," she continued. "A big garden with all the herbs we will need, and we should think about the future, about what we want our lives to look like in 5 years, in 10 years. "I want them to look like this," Quinn said simply. "You and me, working this land together, building something good. Maybe someday with children running around if that is something you want, but mostly just us, happy and safe and free." "Children," Jara repeated thoughtfully. I had not let myself think about children. I did not think I would ever have the chance to be a mother. But yes, someday, I think I would like that very much. Little ones with your stubbornness and my fighting skills. "The world will not know what hit it," Quinn said, grinning. "No," Jara agreed. "It will not." They drifted into sleep like that, wrapped around each other, talking about futures that felt miraculous in their ordinariness. And in the years that came after, they made good on all those quiet dreams and more. Their farm became a meeting place and a sanctuary. Their love became a beacon for others who dared to cross cultural lines. And their story became one that was told around fires on both sides of the frontier, as proof that change was possible. But the heart of it all, the foundation on which everything else was built, was simply this: a man who had seen someone in need and shown kindness, and a woman who had repaid that kindness with fierce protection, and the love that had grown between them when they finally stopped hiding in the shadows and chose to stand together in the light. That was the real story, the one that mattered most. Everything else was just the life they built from that simple beginning, one day at a time, one choice at a time together.